Alright, welcome back. This is Brandon from BrandonHadnot.com, and I am going to show you guys how to use the 3D camera tracker built into Adobe After Effects. So I'm going to be doing this in Adobe Creative Cloud 2018, but right now the most current version is 2020, and you'll still be able to do all of these things that I'm doing inside of this tutorial. I'm going to do my best to just clearly explain how you can use this built-in feature to Adobe After Effects using some royalty-free stock drone footage found from videos.pexels.com. And this is a community where people are, so graciously putting this 4K footage on there and other resolution footage on there, so that then you can use it for projects, for whatever you need to be able to display these things and use them. Didn't really know where I was going with saying that, but what I did was I just searched, drone footage on there. Inside of the download file for this tutorial, you'll find some the same one that I'm working with, so that you can keep along for this project and then maybe experiment with others. But it's all fair for whatever you want to choose. I won't get mad. So anyway, moving on. Inside of Adobe After Effects, what we are going to do is start a new composition. I've already loaded in all of my assets as I've shown in a previous tutorial, so right away I can actually just start a new comp from there. Since we're going to make this comp based on the same dimensions of this actual video file, which looks to be 1920 by 1080, we're just going to make sure that all of that matches. So we can just drag this file down to this composition icon down here, and it'll automatically make a new comp at that exact size. Okay, so a quick little idea of what it is you're going to make. So with this, I've taken some drone footage, I've added in some adjustment layers there, some other assets from some other packs that I've downloaded before. Okay, so inside of the composition window, we will see our actual video that we are going to be editing on. As you can see, it just rolls over to the right, or pans over to the right, and shows this town that it's over with. You see some cows over there, you see some green fields, you see a little bit of, well, not really much traffic at all. So we're going to go over here to the tracker window, and we are going to click Track Camera. You're going to see a step that says Analyzing in Background, Step 1 of 2. And then over here inside of the Effect Controls window, you're going to see that the 3D camera tracker is actually going to take some steps and count how many frames you have in this composition. This video at best is maybe about 19 or 20 seconds. So this one has 453 frames that it has to count from 0 to that full number. And you'll also see a little small percentage over there. It'll also sometimes switch to how many minutes you have left to wait. I'm going to edit this part so that it speeds up for you, so that you don't have to watch this whole thing, and we'll just cut forward. Okay, so now we're at the step where it says Solving Camera. It's just basically calibrating the settings to whatever is happening in the video and putting all of the points on there that we'll be able to grab later to determine where we want our camera to actually follow in track. So all of these right here are points that will basically triangulate a position for you to set a null and or camera inside of your 3D environment, so that then any other asset that you place into the composition window will follow. You'll see this little red bullseye target appear as you hover those, and if we look close enough, I'm going to zoom in a little bit, if we look close enough, you'll see a faint white triangle, which is what I was talking about before when it came to triangulating the position there. We're going to see that every time it selects 3 points that you can choose. From my experience, what I like to do is select some that have it matching the most flat side of the field there. One that actually matches the way that this whole little area is facing. So I'm going to choose one. This one right here looks pretty good. Now when you have that all selected, you'll see those 3 points that are selected at the same time. What we're going to do now is right click on this little white area, and we are going to create a null and camera. Now, not much has changed from the screen, except it has placed our null object right here, and it's facing flat directly on that 3D environment. While we're doing this on a video, which is pretty much 2D, it created a 3D map environment based on everything that's in the scene so that we can match the movement of any other object that we may drag in there. As an example, I usually like to create maybe another new solid, and we could have done that when we right-clicked on this menu when it came to create, solid and camera at the beginning and everything, but I just wanted to get you guys to establish a null and a camera first. But we can still right-click on this area and go down to create solid. That way we'll see how that solid tracks along the camera. I'm going to hit the number 0 on my number pad on a PC, but you can hit Control 0 on a Mac for a full RAM preview, or the spacebar. This is a good way to test how this movement is going to be tracked and how it's actually matching on the video itself. That gives us a good idea of how stable these things are going to remain as we start adding everything else into the comp. So no matter how much you start layering things on, it's all going to match and look closer to reality to the human eye than if we didn't track it at all. I'll just take the playhead back a little bit, back to the beginning, and now I see that this is actually going to match. So for now, I'm going to turn this test solid off, I'll call it, because I know that all of this stuff matches. And by the way, all the dots disappeared. Don't panic. All you have to do is select that original video layer that we tracked. Make sure that you go into the Effect Controls window and select the Effect 3D Camera Tracker, and you'll see all of those dots again. Alright, so now I'm going to go into my project window over here, and I'm going to start bringing in some assets to see if I can really get this stuff to match. Now, on Pexels.com, I went and downloaded some Fire assets that can be brought into the video. A lot of them are recorded against a black backdrop or in the night, because if you drop them into the comp and set their blend mode to screen, like so, that black will disappear and the actual video will blend into the actual scene that you have a whole lot better. So again, that is videos.pexels.com, or you could just go to pexels.com and search for videos themselves. I'll just go ahead and type that in, and I'll just type in Fire, and you'll see the many different options that people have, very kindly uploaded to this website for you to be able to use. One quick and easy way that we can, replace this track solid right here that we know is tracking perfectly with the camera footage is we can take the footage from our project bin here, hold the Alt or Option key on the video, and just click and drag it down on top of that and then let go. Now we see it's actually tracking properly, but we have a problem. It's actually laying flat on the ground, and we don't want that. So what we're going to do is make sure that we bring up rotation by hitting the letter R on the keyboard and just flipping that back to its normal space. And a quick way that we can do that is right click on orientation and click reset. But now we have to actually scale it down, so we're going to hit S on the keyboard and click and drag over these blue values right here so that then we get them down. Now we have it tracking in the way that it's supposed to. So I'm going to scale this down a little bit more, and then we still have to do something. We still see this black area around the actual fire here. So what I have to do is go down to Mode and then click on the drop down that says Normal there and just select either Add or Screen. For this one I'm going to select Add for the fire. And as you can see, it will stay in place. It'll stay tracking on this little footage here. I could even change its direction and put it more on the house there, or change its position I should say. And we're going to do this a couple times. So another important thing to state is if you can't see the blending modes here, you can hit toggle switches in modes and it'll bring those up for you. So another important thing to bring up is that layer is now 3D. We replaced it by bringing it from the project bin, holding Alt or Option, and clicking and dragging it on top of that original layer that we had there, and this took its place. So now what we're going to do is duplicate this a couple times. So I'm going to make sure that this campfire layer is selected. I'm going to go up to Edit, Duplicate, and now it just made a duplicate right on top of itself. So I can actually take this and maybe scale it down a little bit and move it somewhere else on that house so that the both of these are, tracking properly and matching the speed of the actual video. We just want to make sure that we maintain that consistency, and it can get a little tricky sometimes, so don't freak out on yourself. The key to all this is staying calm. So I'm just going to continue. We're going to do this as a rinse, wash, repeat process, and we're just going to continue to paste these around. So edit, duplicate, move this wherever you want to on this building here. This building is having a really bad day. And don't be afraid to use the rotation tool or even the rotation controls on the actual layer itself by pressing R on the keyboard and twisting them around a little bit, to maybe add a little bit of variety and just by having them facing basic directions. And you can scale them down. When it comes to something as inconsistent as the shape of fire, you can scale those down without always holding the shift key. I know it becomes as a habit sometimes to want to always constrain the proportions, but you don't really have to worry about that all the time when it comes to fire. You can also duplicate that fire and not have to move it to a completely different location. You can separate it just a little bit and then turn the other one there a little bit more towards people or away. Change little things like the height. I'm going to speed this up a little bit just so that you all aren't waiting on me doing this, but feel free to take your liberties in terms of where you want to actually put this campfire. The key is to constantly just keep duplicating this and deciding where it's going to go. And again, you can always replace it with other assets by holding Alt or Option and clicking and dragging it right on top of that layer. One thing I do want to add is that when it comes to these individual fires that you have there, you can actually draw masks around them, and kind of hide away some of those extra little parts that you might not want to see. Just make sure that you hit the drop down on the mask and set it to the right controls. Right here it's set to add, so it masked off everything else outside of the actual mask. We want to select subtract so that it's taking away what we want, what we've traced around. So you can do that on a couple of those different flames to also give them a slightly different shape and just be able to control what you can actually see, because for this stock footage, when they created this asset, they lit logs on fire, and even if you hit screen, it doesn't really get rid of the logs that are actually right there. So we just want to make sure that you're not accidentally leaving some of those inside of the comp. If you ever have to adjust the position of a mask, you can actually double click on any one of these modes and decide where it goes. I'm going to do that to the rest of some of these fires here that I have put on this poor establishment. There we go. You can also hit the mask drop down to get those extra controls in there, like feathering to make the soft edges appear instead of such hard ones. That's about enough for now. You can always go in and adjust the rest of them later. Really, we just want to make sure that everything is in place, because once it's in place, adjusting everything else is a lot easier. These over here look like they're not really on the actual building. That can be solved with maybe a little bit more scaling, a little bit better blending, and also adding some effects on there, like some glows, which we'll worry about a little later. There we go. So we've got that first little part done. Honestly, we could keep going and adding more fire in other places on the map here. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate a lot of these. The shortcut for duplicate is also Control D on a PC or Command D on a Mac. And you just really want to choose what areas those are actually in. I can hit, and put those in the background a little bit more to determine, where they actually are, how they're actually moving, how far away they are from other objects. It doesn't hurt to just let it do a playthrough to see if it's actually matching that movement or if it isn't moving at all. That one in the background there should not still be following along, so we know that that's a pretty bad one. You can even take the video here. If we select our original video layer, go to Effect, Controls, and select the 3D camera tracker, we can see more of those nulls there. And if you have to track something way in the background, you can just click on one of those little layers with your bullseye and right click on that. For this one, I am going to create another null. Alright, so you can actually just start duplicating your assets and actually putting them all around the map if you like, just to kind of figure out where things should go, or how they should be, or what type of scale you're really looking for on these things, because what we want to do is make this look like an absolute terrible time for everybody in this town. On this little stock footage, it looks like the person is still dropping things into the flames, so we'll have to fix that. I'm going to go in there and see about what time that actually happens, and I'm just going to mask that out. You probably can't see that mask, so what I'm going to do is change the color of the tag here for you. There we go. I'm going to set those mask settings to subtract. And I'll hit this drop down twice and bring up the feather control so that it's a little bit softer. Maybe even change the mask expansion to bring it in or out a little bit more. And what I can do with that is I can maybe even duplicate this fire layer on top of itself, Control D or Command D depending on what your operating system is, and maybe turn this around on the y-axis, this green here arrow there, and scale it a bit differently, skew it so that it blends into the other one there. Alright. So basically we're keeping this all along the same plane for right now. It's going to look messy when you first start out, but that's okay. You're really just trying to get things into position, and then we'll go around and fix them later. So you just want to make sure that we pay attention to some of these other things here as well. And also one thing is that you don't necessarily have to start everything at the same time. The length of these videos, these little assets here, are limited, so when some of them disappear off the screen, that's fine. And if the ones that are not on the screen already, you can actually have those start a little later so that they last until the end of the comp, like these ones that I'm going to put over here when they're first on the actual camera. See how that one just disappeared? We don't want that. These two can actually be slowed down a bit. We could just select those and right click the layers, go up to time, and time stretch. And we can set the stretch factor to maybe 150, and they'll last just a little bit longer than they were. You'll see that the new duration is now 22 seconds. Hit OK, and now they last long enough to, be there until the end of the comp. So now I'm going to put some fires over here. When the video gets over to the right, I'll just go ahead and duplicate these over here. Put them in more areas. Right now I'm just using some simple assets and putting them where I want to, because I can always replace them later in the way that I showed before. You can put some of these way into the foreground as well and size them up really dramatically. These, I still have the time to stretch on those. I don't really need that on that. So I'm going to set these back to 100 and just move them over here, because the camera doesn't even get over to this point until about that part. So they technically don't have to exist until they get to this part. We see that all of this is happening in the foreground. Nothing's really happening in the background there, and you know, that doesn't look as natural. So we need to start working on that next as well. For the sake of time, we'll keep things pretty simple back there, but I'm going to show you guys how you can actually use those trackers in the back to be able to still make something interesting of this entire area. So starting from the beginning of the timeline again, you know, I've got all these campfires here. I'm just going to select those for you know, organization purposes, and I'm going to click the tag here so that I can change their color. They're all the same right now, but I'm just going to choose orange so that I can know that all of these are in the actual foreground. Now I'm going to select the original video layer, which I'll just hit enter and name it you know, video, so that I can know exactly what I'm looking at here. So that's the video layer, and I'm going to go up to Effect Controls, click on the 3D camera tracker there, and I see that I've got all this extra space for where things need to go. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit with my mouse, look back here, and I'm going to select another area to triangulate its position. I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to say Create Solid. That way, you know, I have another plane that can be traced or tracked, I should say, as the camera is moving, and it's, you know, relative to the position of everything else in 3D space. Because what will happen is if you try to take something from the foreground and just move it in the background without actually mapping it to the background, then it'll move at a different speed. It'll cause sort of a parallax. Like if you see the buildings in the foreground, they're moving a lot faster to the left than all of the objects in the background there. So we see that this is moving. The first thing that I'm going to have to do is actually take the rotation tool here, or hit W on the keyboard, and I'm going to spin it on the X-axis. I'm going to hold Shift so that it snaps, you know, at I believe 45-degree angles apiece, and turn it so that it matches well enough. You can also hit R on that layer, bring up the orientation, and just right click on that and hit reset, and it'll be standing up straight looking right at you. So first things first, I want to replace this little 3D object right here, this 3D solid, with some actual video footage of something like some fire. And since these are the free assets that you can actually get from Pexels, I'm just going to continue to use fire in this case. So let me look at some of the assets that I have. I can double click on a layer and it'll bring me into the footage layer to determine, you know, when that video actually starts, what's actually happening in that video. It's just a good way to preview these before you actually throw them into your timeline and see what's happening. See, this one has this guy in there, you know, beating the logs with a shovel, you know, to be able to get those flames going or whatever he's doing. So I'm going to go back to the composition window, and I'm just going to pick the more simple one that I was using before. And again, we're going to hold the Alt key or the Option key if you're on a Mac, and click and drag this video asset right on top of that track solid right there, and it'll replace it. So again, if you don't see the blending options right away, you want to hit Toggle Switches and Modes right down here at the bottom. That's my autosave getting in the way. Make sure you turn that on. So again, if you don't see the blending options, you want to hit the Toggle Switches and Modes button down here, and then switch it from normal to add or screen. Let's double check screen there. Screen is a little bit softer, and it'll be friendlier to us when we add a glow effect later. So perhaps I should have switched all the other fire layers to that, but it's fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this layer and hit S, because we want to scale it down since it's way in the background there. And then I'll just play and make sure that it's tracking in the way that it's supposed to. Yeah, it's looking good. City's on fire. Absolute chaos. Cool. I'm going to scale it down a little bit more because it's way back there in the background, and that's completely fine. Alright, and it does look like it's moving at a different speed than the foreground, as it's supposed to. You can again make adjustments to that layer. later. But now what we're trying to do is duplicate those background objects and put them in different parts of the 3D space back here, so that then we have a little bit more going on. It's a little bit more exciting, and people aren't just focused on one little corner of the area. Eventually we can go in and start blurring these out a little bit more and adding some variety there. But for now, this is good. Again, we're going to do the whole rinse, wash, repeat process. We're going to have some of the stuff starting off of the screen, rotating it, and explore your liberties with that. Again, got to edit, duplicate, or Control D if you're on a PC, Command D if you're on a Mac, and let's keep on editing those. Now again, some of these layers need to last a little bit longer, so I have no problem with adding a little bit of time stretch to them to make sure that that happens. Again, I'm just going to right click, get a time stretch, and just a subtle one of a factor of 150, and it'll last long enough to last to the end of the comp. Alright, so I'm letting this play out, and that's really important because you want to make sure that things are actually looking how you expect them to look in the final output. And some of them are, some of them aren't. And one of the main ones that catch my attention is this one right here, because as we're passing by we can kind of see around the fire in a way, and it's causing some issues. It's got some hard lines, I believe, where the actual fire ends in terms of the edge of the video on that, and also as we're getting around it we see that the fire is not really on anything. So I'm going to go down here and make some adjustments while I can, because after that we're just going to start changing the environment a little bit to make this look a little bit more believable in terms of color, temperature, and blending and all those other things. So now I see that I'm going to have to maybe feather this off a little bit. So here's what we're going to do. Let me select these and see if I can select them both. Okay, we got those there. So now I know that these two are the ones that are on this tree. In my case, I'm going to feather off the top of these videos a little bit so that I can get rid of that hard edge, because that's a dead giveaway for anybody that can notice it. Even the untrained eye can see that when they're looking at a video. Then you'll get torn apart by 12-year-old YouTubers. I'm just kidding. So here we go, and get that down there. I'm gonna select the other one that I had as well, and just make sure that that video is not really getting too much of a hard line at the top. You can also hit F to just bring up the mask feathers really quickly on the mask, or you can hit MM in rapid succession to bring up all the masking options for a layer. And just want to make sure that it's looking pretty good. You can do that to the top, you can do that to the bottom, you can just make a box around it altogether and feather those edges, but for now this is looking okay. Let's get that back in the center. Alright, some of these other ones could probably be adjusted a little bit too, but for the sake of time I'm going to move on. Alright, so we've got all of these fires set inside of here in the comp. This all started with us just having the video and then adding in the 3D camera tracker and then all of the fires after the fact. So now we're just going to dress this up, and we're going to go to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer. Because right now we're just going to adjust the temperature of this entire comp so that it actually looks like this entire place is on fire. Maybe a volcano went off or something like that, or just some crazy event happened. And we just want to make sure that the viewer's eyes are getting the message that we're trying to convey. So in this adjustment layer here, we're going to go up to Effect, Color Correction, and the first thing I like to do is just add Tint, which is basically going to strip all that color away to begin with. Then you just want to go down to Amount to Tint underneath the effect in the Effect Controls window and just dial it down from 100 to maybe something a little bit lower, like maybe 40%. You can just also type in the number there by clicking on it and hitting enter. Alright, now we want to go right back up to Effect, down to Color Correction, and then we want to go down to Curves. From here, you have your curves channels, and it starts out on RGB, where you have your shadows, midtones, and highlights. And if you just drag down from the center there, you'll see that the image starts to get a little bit darker, a little bit more intense. You can spend a lot of time adjusting this to your needs, but really you just want to make sure that you're getting those areas that you want to see, you're lifting the detail on those layers or those areas that you want to really bring out to the audience's eye, and you're just kind of matching the color temperature to what you want it to be. You don't want to go too extreme in any one direction unless that's just what you're going for. But I'm just going to lift the red up a little bit, and again I'm switching these channels by hitting this drop down menu. We were just on RGB. I'm going to red now and adjusting that. And you have to be careful not to accidentally grab one of these other lines, because for instance, if I grab the green, it's automatically going to jump me to the green. But while I'm on there, I do want it to have a little bit of yellow in there. So I'll adjust this just a little bit and see how we can mix that. Because as you know, red and green makes what color? Yellow, for the most part. I'm going to take out some of the blue, definitely. In there, so that it's not as cool looking color temperature wise. You can play around with these until you get comfortable with them. These take some practice, but eventually you'll be able to get it and you'll be able to understand it. Also helps to move the playhead around a little bit to kind of see how other areas look, because you might like one more than the other in that case in terms of what it's doing. Adjustment layers have blending modes just like everything else. So if you want to check how it's blending with those other things, if you set it to multiply, you can see how much more intense it is and how it's crunching everything down. You can set it to screen and see what it's doing. You definitely don't want that in this case. But you can play around with a lot of those different things and kind of see what it is. I can hit T on the layer and bring up opacity and just kind of lower that a little bit so that I'm forcing it to not be as intense. Those are just some extra options that you don't necessarily have to use. Alright, so I'm liking the color temperature that I have with this one. I could push it a little bit further, but we'll maybe do that a little bit later. The main goal of this tutorial is just to show you how to use the 3D camera tracker and get some things in order in terms of actually having them match the movement along the way. Because if you can match the movement on the camera using these different selection areas, on the main video, then you can pretty much do a rinse, wash, repeat process and get whatever you want out of the composition to be able to make something really interesting. Now that we have our color temperature set a little bit more, what we can do is just continue to make some minor adjustments to the other things. So you can scroll in, or you can hit the zoom on this one here. You can use the hand tool to easily navigate around the area and fix this, or you can just hold your finger down on the space bar to do the same thing, and you can just click and select specific layers. I'm going to lock the adjustment layer down by hitting the lock switch underneath this here in the layers panel, and then I'm just going to go and select some of these and do a little bit of masking. Now remember, any layer that you actually select, when you choose the mask or the pen tool, you can actually just draw a shape on top of it and then you'll start to mask it away. Now you can see that for here it's starting on add by default, and I kind of don't want that. So I'm just going to go down here to the masks and click add and change it to subtract. And again, I'm going to hit the drop down for the mask and just dial up feather so that that edge is a little bit softer and not so hard. Okay, so there you have it. We have our basic 3D camera tracking going on right there. We've got some assets on there to sort of make that follow along with the camera. Now I'm just going to add in some basic glow effects onto some other things here just to make sure that the whole environment looks pretty believable, in terms of how the fires emit actual light onto their environment. I'm going to select that adjustment layer that we made again. I'm going to go to Effect Controls. We've already played around with the color. Now I'm going to go to Effect and go down to Stylize and choose Glow. So you see it's making everything kind of go crazy. But if we take the glow threshold up a little bit, we can see that we can make that not so intense. And then we can boost up glow radius so that then we can control how far that actually spreads. We can take glow intensity up or down a bit depending on how much we want that to be, or how strong we want that to be. So now all of these fires have a bit of a glow to them, but you can absolutely add individual glows to each of those fire layers inside of the comp. So I'm going to lock the adjustment layer again because it's sitting on top, so it's going to think that you're constantly selecting that layer instead of all of these. And I'm just going to go in, especially on this one right here, and zoom in and add a glow effect to just this layer to show you guys what I mean. So I'll select this fire layer here, and I'll go to Effect, Stylize, Glow, and start to change that a little bit. I'll start changing the glow radius on that one to really boost it up. Maybe even bring up the glow threshold so it's not too crazy. These masks are really getting in my way, so I'm just going to hide them by hitting this toggle mask and shape path visibility icon right here on the composition window, and now they're out of my way. You can turn them back on at any time. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. So I think I'm going to go and select all of these layers here, but first I want to select the one that I just added a glow on, because if I select the glow effect, I hit Edit, Copy, I can select all these other layers here that I want to add an individual glow to, and go to Edit, Paste. And now all of them have that glow with that exact same setting that I had before. It's looking pretty good so far. There are still some extra things that we have to add in here, like some extra lighting behind some of these fires to make sense of some things. So we just want to make sure that we actually have that under control. So one thing that I also did was I made a new layer, a new solid, and right now we want to sort of control the haze on the horizon there. So I'm going to make a new solid, and I'm going to make it a pretty, dusty looking color, maybe sort of like a brownish orange, and that'll be okay. We can just click OK. We're going to take the opacity down on this one by hitting T on the keyboard and taking that opacity down just a bit. Then we're going to choose the rectangular mask tool there in the toolbar, and what we'll do is we'll just draw a mask along the top half of the comp. Alright, now for this mask we're just going to hit the drop down, and we're just going to feather it out so that it's a lot softer than it initially was. I'm going to hit this toggle mask and shape path visibility icon here just to kind of get it out of the way so I can see what it's really looking like. Now this one we don't have to worry about it being 3D or tracking because it's always in the background, and it's going to be sort of like the permanent haze along the composition. Okay, so with that we have our haze over our little town here that is on fire, and already it's looking a lot better. One thing that we can do if you're having trouble playing this back fully is we can adjust this actual workspace bar here down from 20 seconds to maybe the first 6 seconds, and you'll have a little bit better a better time rendering this out so that you can just see the main gist of how it's looking after you've already laid out the entire area. Now I have to warn you that you'll have to put this back to where it was if you do want to render out this whole entire 20-second comp, but really for this one being so simple as it is, we really only need the first 6 seconds. And that's looking pretty decent so far. We can keep on pushing this and adding more things in there. If you've got some smoke comps of your own, you can add those in. Right now I'm going to look at Video Copilot's over here. If I go to videocopilot.net, I'm actually using one of their products called Action Essentials 2. And this is one of the first products from Video Copilot that I bought way back in the beginning when it was 720 by 1080. That was the only one I could afford. That was broke. But they actually have some great stuff on their website that is just full of all the things that you could use for filmmaking. FilmRight is also great too for that kind of thing, and there are also some free assets out there as well. If I go back to videos.pexels.com and search for smoke, you might be able to find some free smoke footage there that you can actually change. As long as it's against a black background, you'll be fine. Alright, so that's looking pretty decent. What I'm going to do is add in a couple more assets to kind of show you how much further you could push this if you want. Also, there are some other things that I'm starting to notice the more I play this. And you'll be looking at, your comp a million times over. So you'll be making a lot of adjustments as you go, and that's totally normal. All right, so we've got some of those areas there. There are still some things that we got to do. There's no real shine happening on these little layers here. So what I'm going to have to do is start to make some solids that can be glow effects for these. And I have to make sure that they're actually following the fires themselves, so that then we don't have like a mismatch speed in the comp. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up to Layer, New, Solid once more. Got to make the color orange. And for this we're just going to say Fire Glow. Hit OK. So now we've got this fire glow here, and I actually meant to drag that way at the top of all of the things there. So now we've got this fire glow. I'm going to hit T on the layer and bring down the opacity. And I'm just going to choose the ellipse tool and first make this 3D. Then I'm just going to draw over some areas with these masks. I'm going to feather them out right away, because when you draw multiple masks on one layer, it will make multiple masks for you to change the settings for. And you have to do those individually most of the time. Again, you just bring up, you can just hit F on the keyboard and it'll bring up the masks that way. So it's really important to copy the position of these fire layers, of just one of them, and pasting it onto the position of the orange solid that you made to be the glow for these fires. And then adjusting your masks accordingly for that. And the reason for that is because you want them to follow the camera tracking the same as the actual flames do. That way you have that glow being in the same place as the flames, and it's not moving at a different speed and being super weird about it. So I'm actually going to make a new solid. I'm going to go up to Layer, New, Solid again, and I am going to just click OK. I'm going to bring down the opacity again for this one so I can see where it is. And temporarily I'm going to lock the layer so that I can select this flame right here and see where that is. I'm going to bring up position. I'm going to select position of that layer. I'm going to edit, copy, and then I'm going to unlock that solid layer that I just had, make it 3D, click that 3D switch there, and I'm going to hit P on the keyboard to bring up position for that layer. I'm going to select position. I'm going to go to Edit, Paste, or Control V, Command V if you're on a Mac. So now that I know it's in place, I am going to start drawing the mask for this one here. So that one's there, and I'll just again hit F or hit this drop down here and dial up the mask feather to make it softer. And I'm going to see if I can get away with drawing a mask over here on these flames and see if it still matches up. And I know these are on a different background, so I'm not going to try it with that. Okay, so now we have our sort of like muted glows in the background of these flames there. If you really want to get those flicker effects to start looking a little bit more realistic, then what we can do is duplicate the flames and blur them out so that then they're against the building and they're looking a little bit more realistic there. I'll show you that with just one of these as far as how that works. Let us lock these orange solid layers for a second and just go in and select one of these layers for the fire. I'll go down here, I'll scroll down and see which one that is. Actually, I just need to minimize all these. There it is. So I'll select this layer here, and I'm simply going to duplicate it. Again, that's edit, duplicate, and it's going to duplicate onto itself. But I want this to be beneath the other one, so I'll just drag it underneath there. And what I'm going to do is scale it up a little bit. I'm going to hit scale on the keyboard and just dial up the numbers a little bit, maybe move it back into place as far as where it is. And really quick, what I'm going to have to do is go into the effect controls window here that we have, and I'm going to have to go to effect and then blur and sharpen, and I'm just going to do a Gaussian blur here. Now the first thing I want to check is repeat edge pixels, and I'll just dial this up pretty drastically, honestly. That way you got a little bit more shine on that building. You can also stretch out or distort the the look of this so that it's even more crazy looking. Now this is really intense. So what we're gonna have to do is make sure that on that layer we bring up the opacity by hitting the letter T on the keyboard and just maybe dialing that down a little bit, because again this one still has that glow on it, and honestly we might not need it, and that's a good thing to check to see if that's something that you actually want on your layers as you go along here, because while the glow does add to the intensity and it's really bright and everything, I can't really see much of the detail in the fire itself, so it's really a personal preference at that point. But for me, I'm going to either turn it off or just hit delete while having that glow on there, and see how that works for me. I actually like it better without that glow. Now I would put it on the roof over here, but it's enough to communicate to say that it's happening on the front of this house, I feel like. And then I'm going to select this layer over here and do the same thing. I'm going to duplicate that, and I could just move this down underneath there, or I could just select the one that was already underneath it as a result of being duplicated. It doesn't really matter. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to scale that up a little bit and just kind of move it into place, because we are going to blur this out quite a bit. So I'm going to go to effect again, and the last effect that you use is always going to pop up underneath effect controls, but in case you lose that for whatever reason and you don't remember in the future, you go down to blur and sharpen and then Gaussian blur. Fast blocks blur will work just as well, but we'll just do the Gaussian blur for now, and make sure that you check repeat edge pixels and just dial up the blurriness. Do that quite a bit, and you can scale that up a little bit. Didn't mean to move it. And then again, subtlety is key, so you want to take the letter T, bring up the opacity, and just click and dial that down a little bit, because it only needs so much shine. You don't need all that glow. Remember that the adjustment layer is already adding a glow to everything that we add into the comp if you still have that on. Alright, so we got these going on. Again, I shrank my comp down to 6 seconds just for the sake of rendering time in this case. I totally would render this out to 20 seconds every time, but depending on the machine that you're working on and what you've got going on at your personal device, it might be easier on you and your computer if you just make sure that this workspace bar was set to something a little bit shorter for your comp. The video itself was about 20 seconds worth of drone footage, but if you hit the number 0 if you're using a PC, or Control 0 to do a full RAM preview on a Mac, you'll see how long it'll take. Alright, so you can see that we have our comp here. We've got our fire going around in the foreground and the background. We've got these flames going on. Honestly, some of the flames are moving a little fast, and like I said before, you can change those around in terms of right clicking on it, going into time, and then time stretch and making those operate a little bit slower by increasing that stretch factor. But it's totally up to you. What we just wanted to do is just make sure that we were tracking things using the 3D camera tracker and then adding in assets after the fact. The more that you layer this out, the more it'll look alive, like things are happening inside of it. But just remember that the more that you add inside of here, the more complicated it's going to get, and the more rendering time you're likely going to need. So that was just today's tutorial. Let me know if this was helpful to you or not. I'll try to continue to improve in the future when it comes to making these out for you guys, and I'll continue to put small ones and complicated ones as well. So that's it for today's tutorial. I hope that it was helpful for you guys, and that it was easy enough to follow. Haven't done one of these in a long while, so sorry if it was a little bit more difficult than the last few ones that I've done, but I promise to improve in the future as I continue to keep on going. Again, this is just a simple use of the 3D camera tracker built-in tool inside of Adobe After Effects whenever you have some stable footage on there in order to make a comp, whether it be for your short film or your music video visuals or whatever it is that you're doing. It could be a really useful thing inside of Adobe After Effects to make sure that you just have everything matching the camera movement from a stabilized device such as a camera with a tripod or your drone. All right, thanks for watching.